every Friday evening for 5 years. I'd called Dr. Victor Chen to thank him. He'd saved my life after a massive heart attack, given me 5 more years with my daughter Megan. Last Friday, as I sat across from him at Boston's finest restaurant, celebrating his marriage to my daughter, a waiter leaned close and whispered 4 words that stopped my heart cold. Get her out now. The man who saved my life might be planning to take my daughter's, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning of that evening, when everything still made sense. Ristorante Lucia sat in the heart of Back Bay, the kind of place where the tablecloths were whiter than fresh snow and the wine list was thicker than a Bible. Soft jazz floated through the air, mingling with the gentle clink of crystal glasses and murmured conversations. It was the sort of restaurant I'd never set foot in during my 40 years as an electrician. My hands were built for wire and conduit, not for navigating 5 different forks. But tonight was special. My daughter Megan had married Dr. Victor Chen 3 weeks ago, and this dinner was their way of celebrating with me now that they'd returned from their honeymoon in Italy. I watched them from across the candlelit table. Megan, 34 years old, with her mother's auburn hair and my blue eyes. She was glowing in a way I hadn't seen since before Linda passed 4 years ago. The grief that had shadowed her face for so long had finally lifted, replaced by something that looked like genuine happiness. And Victor, Dr. Victor Chen, 40 years old, tall and handsome, with surgeon's hands that moved with deliberate grace even when he was simply reaching for his wine glass. Chief of cardiac surgery at Boston General Hospital, the man who had held my heart in those hands 5 years ago and decided to let it keep beating. I remembered waking up in the ICU, tubes everywhere, Linda crying beside my bed. The doctors had told her I had maybe a 10% chance of surviving the night, but Victor had performed a miracle. 7 hours of surgery, 3 bypasses, and somehow he'd pulled me back from the edge. Linda had called him an angel. Now that angel had married my daughter. Dad, you're doing that thing again, Megan said, her smile teasing. What thing? The thing where you stare at Victor like you're trying to figure out if he's real. Victor laughed, warm and easy. It's all right, Megan. Your father still can't believe someone actually wanted to marry you. Megan swatted his arm playfully. Hey, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Victor raised his glass toward me. To family, new and old. I lifted my glass and clinked it against theirs. The wine was something French that cost more than my monthly electric bill. It tasted like money and oak and things I didn't understand. So, Rob, Victor said, setting down his glass. How's the retirement treating you? Can't complain. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's porch light last week. She tried to pay me in banana bread. Did you take it? 3 loaves. Woman makes incredible banana bread. Victor's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and something flickered across his face. Just for a moment. A tightening around his eyes that disappeared so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. I'm sorry, he said, already standing. He kissed Megan's forehead and headed toward the entrance, phone pressed to his ear. I watched him go. That strange flicker, still nagging at the back of my mind. Probably nothing. The man was a cardiac surgeon. Emergencies came with the territory. He works too hard, Megan said, but there was pride in her voice. Last week he stayed at the hospital for 36 hours straight. Saved 2 lives. That's my son-in-law, I said, and I meant it. Victor was everything I could have hoped for. Successful, kind, devoted to my daughter. Linda would have loved him. The thought of my wife brought a familiar ache. 4 years since the cancer took her. And some days, it still felt like yesterday. She should have been here tonight, sitting beside me, crying happy tears into her napkin the way she always did at family celebrations. I wish Mom could have met him, Megan said quietly, reading my thoughts the way she always could. She would have approved. You think so? I know so. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She'd be so proud of you, Meggie. The nursing career, the wedding, all of it. You've built a beautiful life. Megan's eyes glistened. Thanks, Dad. That's when I felt it. A presence at my shoulder. The faint smell of kitchen grease and nervous sweat. I turned to find an older man standing beside our table. He wore the restaurant's uniform, a white shirt and black vest. But something about him seemed off. His silver hair was slightly disheveled. His eyes, dark and intense, kept darting toward the entrance where Victor had disappeared. He leaned down, pretending to adjust something on the table, and his lips moved close to my ear. Get her out now. The words were barely a whisper, carried on breath that trembled. I froze. What did you say? The man's hand found mine under the tablecloth. I felt paper press against my palm, rough and folded. Your daughter is in danger, he breathed. The man she married has killed before. Get her away from him. Tonight. Then he straightened, his face sliding back into the neutral mask of a server, and walked away toward the kitchen. Just like that, as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb in my lap. I sat there, heart pounding, the paper burning against my skin. Dad? Megan's voice seemed to come from very far away. Dad, are you okay? You look pale. Through the window, I could see Victor finishing his call. He was smiling now, pocketing his phone, starting back toward the entrance. The man who saved my life. The man who killed before. My fingers tightened around the folded paper as Victor pushed through the door, that easy smile spreading across his face when he spotted us. Sorry about that, he said, sliding back into his seat. Where were we? I looked at my daughter's happy face. I looked at my son-in-law's perfect smile, and I felt the stranger's warning pulsing in my hand like a second heartbeat. Something was very, very wrong. 4 words. That's all it took to shatter the perfect evening I thought I was having. Get her out now. The paper felt like it was burning a hole through my palm. I kept my hand under the tablecloth, fingers wrapped around that folded note like it might explode if I let go. Across from me, Victor was talking about their honeymoon in Tuscany. Something about a vineyard and a sunset, but his words seemed to reach me through water. Dad? Megan touched my arm. You're not listening. Sorry, sweetheart. Just tired. Victor's eyes found mine. Dark and intelligent. The eyes of a man who noticed everything. You look pale, Rob. Are you feeling all right? Any chest pain? Of course he'd ask about my heart. The heart he'd saved. The heart that was now hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I'm fine, I managed. Just need some water. I reached for my glass with my free hand, nearly knocking it over. Smooth, Rob. Real smooth. Victor was still watching me. That slight furrow between his brows that I'd seen him wear when studying a patient's chart. Maybe we should call it an early night, Megan suggested. Dad's had a long week. No. I forced a smile. I'm fine. Really. Tell me more about Italy. Victor launched back into his story. But something had shifted. His words came easier now, his gestures more relaxed, like he'd decided I wasn't worth worrying about, just a tired old man who couldn't handle a fancy dinner. I let my gaze drift toward the kitchen, searching for the waiter who'd upended my world. The man with silver hair and trembling hands who'd called my son-in-law a killer. He was gone. I scanned the restaurant. White tablecloths, candlelight, well-dressed couples murmuring over expensive wine. No sign of him anywhere. Excuse me, I said, standing abruptly. Restroom. Megan nodded, barely looking up from the dessert menu Victor was showing her. I walked toward the back of the restaurant, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The restroom hallway was empty. I pushed through the men's room door, checked under the stalls. Nothing. Then I tried the kitchen entrance, but a young server blocked my path. Sir, this area is for staff only. The waiter, I said. Older guy. Silver hair. Where is he? The server frowned. I'm sorry, sir. I don't know who you mean. We don't have anyone matching that description on shift tonight, but he was just out there. He came to our table, Are you sure it was one of our staff? Sometimes guests get confused. Confused. The word stung. I wasn't confused. I knew what I'd heard, what I'd felt. That man had pressed a note into my hand and told me my daughter was in danger. I retreated to the handwriting was shaky but clear. Blue ink on white paper, like something written in a hurry. Your daughter is in danger. The man she married has ended lives before. 4 patients that I know of. All wealthy. All dead within a year of his successful surgeries. I was supposed to be the 5th. He doesn't know I survived. Meet me tomorrow. 742 Harbor Street, Dorchester. Apartment 3B. Come alone. Tell no one. Trust no one. Especially not him. Below the message, a name. Antonio Reyes. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. 4 patients dead. Wealthy patients. Successful surgeries that somehow ended in death. And this Antonio Reyes was supposed to be the 5th, but survived. My hands were shaking. The paper trembled between my fingers like a leaf in a storm. This was insane. Victor Chen was one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in New England. He'd received awards, published papers, been featured in medical journals. He'd saved my life. For God's sake, he'd held my heart in his hands and chosen to let it beat. But why had the waiter, who wasn't a waiter, looked so terrified? Why had his hands trembled when he slipped me this note? Why had Victor's face flickered when that phone call came in? I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my wallet. Then I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. 60 years old, gray hair, weathered face, hands scarred from decades of electrical work. Just a retired electrician who'd somehow found himself holding a note that accused his son-in-law of murder. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to crumple the paper and throw it away and go back to that table and enjoy dessert with my daughter and her wonderful husband. But Linda's voice echoed in my memory. She'd always said I had instincts, that I could sense when something was wrong before anyone else saw it. Trust your gut, Rob, she'd tell me. It's never steered you wrong. My gut was screaming right now. I dried my face and walked back to the table. Victor and Megan were laughing about something, their heads close together, the picture of newlywed bliss. My daughter looked so happy, happier than she'd been since her mother died. How could I destroy that with accusations from a stranger? How could I not? Dad. You were gone forever, Megan said. We ordered tiramisu. Your favorite. Perfect, I said, sliding into my seat. Victor was watching me again. That subtle assessment, the way a predator might study its environment. Or maybe that was just how surgeons looked at everyone. Analyzing, evaluating, deciding who was worth saving. Everything okay? Rob? Fine, I said. Just old man stuff. Prostate's not what it used to be. Victor laughed. Megan groaned. The moment passed, but as I ate my tiramisu and made small talk and pretended everything was normal, the note in my wallet felt heavier than lead. 4 words had changed everything. Get her out now. By the time we said our goodbyes in the parking lot, I'd made my decision. Tomorrow, I would go to 742 Harbor Street. I would meet this Antonio Reyes, and I would find out the truth about the man my daughter had married. Because if there was even a chance that stranger was right, if Victor Chen was something other than the angel we all believed him to be, then I owed it to Megan to know. I owed it to Linda. I owed it to the heart still beating in my chest, the one Victor's hands had saved. The same hands that might be planning to take my daughter's life. Sleep wouldn't come that night. I lay in the darkness of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced from the streetlight outside. Linda's side of the bed was still empty after 4 years. I'd never been able to bring myself to sleep in the middle. Some habits you just can't break. The note sat on my nightstand, unfolded now, its words seared into my memory. 4 patients that I know of, all wealthy, all dead within a year of his successful surgeries. I turned on the lamp and read it again. Then again. Each time, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. They didn't. At 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. I shuffled to the kitchen, made coffee I didn't want, and sat at the table where Linda and I had shared 32 years of breakfasts. Her photo watched me from the shelf above the stove. Smiling, always smiling. "What would you do?" I asked the empty room. The silence didn't answer. I thought about the night of my heart attack. October 15th, 5 years ago. I'd been working late at the Henderson building, rewiring the 3rd floor. The pain hit like someone had shoved a hot poker through my chest. I remembered falling. I remembered the cold concrete against my face. I remembered thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the ICU at Boston General. Linda was there, her face swollen from crying. Megan too, holding my hand like she'd never let go. And then Dr. Victor Chen walked in. He was younger then, still in his mid-30s, but already making a name for himself. He'd explained everything in that calm, measured voice. Massive myocardial infarction, 3 blocked arteries. 7 hours of surgery, touch and go for a while. But the bypass was successful. "You're a lucky man, Mr. Callahan." Linda had called him an angel. She'd sent him thank you cards every month until she got too sick to write. Even then, she'd made me promise to keep thanking him, to never forget what he'd done for our family. I'd kept that promise. Every Friday, I called to thank him. Even after Linda passed, even after he started dating Megan, even after he became my son-in-law. And now a stranger was telling me the angel was a devil. I opened my laptop, the ancient thing wheezing to life like it resented being woken. Linda had always handled the computer stuff. I still typed with 2 fingers and had to squint at the screen. I typed Dr. Victor Chen, Boston General, into Google. The results were overwhelming. Award ceremonies, medical conference presentations, a feature in Boston Magazine calling him the Heart Whisperer. Photo after photo of Victor smiling, shaking hands with hospital administrators, accepting plaques and trophies. Nothing suspicious, nothing sinister. Just a brilliant surgeon doing brilliant work. I refined my search. Victor Chen, patient deaths. Nothing unusual. Every surgeon loses patients. It's part of the job. The mortality statistics for cardiac surgery were actually better at Boston General than the national average, and Victor's personal numbers were exceptional. I tried another angle. Boston General Hospital, cardiac surgery malpractice. A few results. Old cases. Settled out of court. None involving Victor. Standard stuff for any major hospital. I was about to give up when I stumbled onto something different. A forum. One of those websites where patients share experiences and family members vent frustrations. A thread titled Suspicious Deaths at Boston General. The original post was from 3 years ago. Anonymous. My mother died 6 weeks after her heart surgery. The doctors said complications, but she was fine at her last checkup. Healthy. Strong. Then suddenly, she's dead. And I find out she changed her will 2 months before the surgery, left everything to some charity I'd never heard of. Anyone else experience something similar? Below it, a handful of replies. Most dismissive. Sorry for your loss, but that's not unusual. Complications happen. Maybe you should talk to a grief counselor. But one reply caught my attention. Posted 2 years ago by someone called Survivor AR. I know exactly what you're talking about. I almost died too. Same hospital. Same surgeon. They thought I was dead, but I survived. There are others. More than you know. If you want to talk, email me. Survivor AR. Antonio Reyes. AR. My heart was pounding now. That familiar tightness in my chest that made me reach instinctively for the nitroglycerin pills I kept in my pocket. I took one, let it dissolve under my tongue, and waited for the pressure to ease. I scrolled down. The thread had gone quiet after that. No more posts, no follow-up from the original commenter. Either they'd given up, or they'd found another way to communicate. I searched for Survivor AR across other forums. Found nothing. Whoever Antonio Reyes was, he'd been careful. He'd reached out once, left a breadcrumb, and then disappeared back into the shadows. Until tonight. Until he'd appeared at that restaurant, disguised as a waiter, and pressed a note into my hand. I looked at the clock. 4:17 in the morning. The address burned in my mind. 742, Harbor Street, Dorchester, apartment 3B. Part of me wanted to go right now, to bang on that door and demand answers. But the rational part, the part that had kept me alive through 40 years of working with electricity, knew better. Rushing got people killed. Patience kept them breathing. I would wait until morning. I would go to that address, and I would find out who Antonio Reyes really was. But first, I needed to know more about those patients. The wealthy ones who died after Victor's successful surgeries. If there was a pattern, I would find it. I started a new search, my 2 fingers pecking at the keyboard with renewed purpose. Outside my window, the first gray light of dawn was bleeding into the sky. A new day. A day that would either prove a stranger wrong or confirm my worst nightmare. Either way, by this time tomorrow, nothing would be the same. I thought of Megan, sleeping peacefully beside her husband, trusting him, loving him, completely unaware that her father was sitting in the dark, searching for evidence that the man she married might be a monster. Some secrets are better left buried, but some secrets can kill you if you don't dig them up first. The restaurant manager looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "I'm sorry, sir, but I've already told you. We don't have anyone by that description on our staff." I stood in the lobby of Ristorante Lucia, morning light streaming through the windows, feeling like a fool. The place looked different in daylight, less magical, more ordinary. Just another expensive restaurant with too many forks and not enough common sense in its pricing. "Older gentleman," I repeated. "Silver hair, maybe 50, 55. He was working last night. Came to our table around 8:30. The manager, a thin woman with a pinched expression, shook her head. "Sir, I was here all evening. I know every member of my staff. No one matching that description works for us. Perhaps you're thinking of another establishment?" I wasn't. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd felt. That trembling hand pressing paper into my palm. Those terrified eyes. Could someone have snuck in? Pretended to be staff? Her expression shifted from polite confusion to barely concealed annoyance. "Sir, this is a fine dining establishment. We have security protocols. No one simply walks in and pretends to be a waiter, but someone had." Antonio Reyes had done exactly that. I thanked her for her time and walked out into the October morning. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and distant harbor. I sat in my truck for a long moment, staring at the address I'd written on my hand. 742, Harbor Street, Dorchester, apartment 3B. 40 minutes later, I was there. Dorchester wasn't Back Bay. The buildings were older here, tired-looking, paint peeling from fire escapes. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business because asking questions could get you hurt. Number 7. 142 was a 3-story walk-up squeezed between a laundromat and a bodega. The front door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Someone had taped a handwritten sign to it. Buzzer. Broken. Knock loud. I climbed to the 3rd floor, my knees protesting every step. Apartment 3B was at the end of the hallway. I could hear muffled television through the thin walls. Someone cooking something that smelled like onions and regret. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Harder this time. Footsteps. A pause. Then a voice. Low and cautious. "Who is it?" "Rob Callahan. You came to my table last night. At the restaurant." Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost feel him on the other side of the door, weighing his options, deciding whether to trust me or run. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack, still chained, and a dark eye peered through. "You came alone? Anyone follow you?" "I don't think so." The eye studied me for a long moment. Then the chain rattled free and the door swung open. Antonio Reyes looked different without the waiter's uniform. Smaller somehow, more fragile. He wore a faded Boston Celtics sweatshirt and jeans that hung loose on his thin frame. The silver hair I remembered was real, but up close, I could see it had gone gray prematurely. He was maybe 50, but life had carved deep lines into his face. "Come in," he said. The apartment was small, one room serving as living space, kitchen, and bedroom. A bathroom I could see through a half-open door. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but it was the walls that stopped me cold. Every surface was covered. Photographs, newspaper clippings, printouts from the internet, handwritten notes, connected by red string like something out of a detective movie. And at the center of it all, repeated dozens of times, in different sizes and angles, was the face of Dr. Victor Chen. "Jesus Christ," I breathed. Antonio closed the door behind me, locked it, and leaned against it like he expected someone to try breaking through. "Now you see," he said quietly. "Now you understand." I walked closer to the wall, my eyes scanning the chaos. Names jumped out at me. Eleanor Whitmore, Margaret Sullivan, Richard Donovan, Catherine Hayes. Each name had a photograph beside it. Each photograph showed a smiling face, and each smiling face had a red X drawn across it. These are his victims? The ones I could confirm. Antonio moved to stand beside me. His hands were trembling again, just like last night. "There may be more. He's been doing this for at least 6 years. How do you know?" "How can you be sure?" Antonio's laugh was bitter. "Because I was supposed to be one of them." He pointed to a photograph I hadn't noticed. A younger man, with dark hair and a confident smile, standing in front of a restaurant. That was me. 3 years ago, before Victor Chen decided my life was worth less than my bank account. What happened? Antonio sat heavily on a worn armchair. He gestured for me to take the couch. Between us, a coffee table covered with more documents, more evidence, more pieces of a nightmare I still couldn't fully believe. "I was a successful man once," he began. "Owned 3 restaurants in the city. Made good money. No family to speak of. Never married. My parents passed years ago. I was alone." He paused, his eyes distant. "Then I started having chest pains. My doctor referred me to Boston General, to the best cardiac surgeon in the city, to Victor Chen." Antonio's voice had gone flat, reciting facts like they belonged to someone else. "The surgery was scheduled. But first, there was paperwork. So much paperwork, including updating my will and my life insurance. The hospital social worker was very helpful, very insistent. She recommended a charity to include in my estate, the Chen Foundation for Cardiac Research. I felt sick. "You signed?" "I had no reason not to. I trusted them. I trusted him." Antonio leaned forward. "The surgery went perfectly. That's what they told me afterward. Textbook procedure. But 2 days later, I coded on the recovery ward. Heart stopped. They pronounced me dead. But you're here." A nurse, young woman, just started her shift. She saw something on my monitor that didn't make sense. She called a code when everyone else had given up. Antonio's hands clenched. They brought me back. Barely. But Victor Chen didn't know. By the time he checked, I was breathing again. And I had seen something during those minutes when I was supposed to be dead. "What did you see?" Antonio met my eyes, and in them I saw something beyond fear. Something cold and certain and unforgiving. I saw him standing over me, watching, waiting for me to die. And when the monitors flatlined, I saw him smile. The words hung in the air like smoke. He smiled. Antonio repeated, like he'd just won a prize. Antonio's hands trembled as he poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. The kitchen area of his apartment was cramped, barely enough room for 1 person, let alone 2. But the coffee was hot and strong, and I needed something to steady my nerves after what he'd just told me. After I recovered, Antonio continued, settling back into his armchair, I started asking questions. The hospital social worker, who'd pushed me to update my will, she resigned a week after my surgery. No forwarding address. The charity she'd recommended, a shell organization. Money goes in, disappears into a maze of accounts, and eventually finds its way to Victor Chen. How do you know all this? 2.5 years of digging. Antonio gestured at the walls surrounding us. I sold my restaurants, used the money to hire private investigators, forensic accountants, anyone who could help me find the truth. I looked at the photographs again. Eleanor Whitmore, Margaret Sullivan, Richard Donovan, Catherine Hayes. 4 faces, 4 lives, 4 red X marks. Tell me about them, I said. Antonio stood and walked to the wall. His fingers brushed Eleanor Whitmore's photograph. A silver-haired woman with kind eyes and a pearl necklace. Eleanor Whitmore, 72 years old, retired schoolteacher, widowed, no children. She came to Victor for a valve replacement in 2018. Textbook surgery. Full recovery. Then, 6 weeks later, she died in her sleep. Official cause: post-surgical complications. He moved to the next photograph. A woman in her late 60s with short gray hair and a defiant smile. Margaret Sullivan, 68, divorced. Her children lived in California and barely spoke to her. Triple bypass in 2020. Successful. She was walking 2 miles a day within a month. Then her heart simply stopped. Massive cardiac arrest. No warning signs. The third photograph showed a distinguished man in a business suit. Richard Donovan, 75, retired investment banker. Never married. No family. Bypass surgery in 2022. He died on the operating table. Victor called it an unavoidable complication. Said his heart was too weak. And the fourth? Antonio's jaw tightened. Catherine Hayes, 70, retired teacher like Eleanor. Lived alone. Loved gardening and her 3 cats. His voice caught. She died last year. Allergic reaction to medication after her surgery. Except Catherine wasn't allergic to anything. I checked. I stared at the wall, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. 4 deaths. 4 wealthy, isolated people. 4 successful surgeries, followed by unexpected complications. The pattern, I said slowly. They were all alone. No close family. No one to ask questions. Exactly. Antonio returned to his seat. Victor doesn't choose his victims randomly. He studies them, learns their histories, their finances, their family situations. He picks the ones who won't be missed, the ones whose deaths won't raise suspicions. But you survived. You had family. Friends. No. Antonio shook his head. I told you. I was alone. Parents dead. Never married. My staff were employees, not family. I was perfect for him. A bitter smile. I was supposed to die quietly and leave everything to his fake charity. Instead, a 23-year-old nurse decided to check my vitals one more time. Have you contacted her? The nurse who saved you? I tried. She transferred to a hospital in Seattle 6 months after my surgery. Said she needed a fresh start. Antonio paused. I don't blame her. I think she knew something was wrong. Maybe she saw more than she told anyone. Either way, she ran. Smart woman. I thought about Megan. My daughter worked at Boston General. Same hospital. Same cardiac unit. Had she ever noticed anything strange? Had she ever wondered about the patients who didn't make it? No. Megan trusted Victor completely. She loved him. She would never suspect the man she'd married of something so monstrous. Why me? I asked suddenly. Why approach me last night? Why not go to the police? Antonio laughed. It was not a happy sound. The police? I went to them 2 years ago. Showed them everything. The financial records. The pattern. The connection to Victor's charity. He shook his head. They investigated for 3 weeks and found nothing conclusive. No evidence of wrongdoing. Just a dedicated surgeon with an unfortunate number of complicated cases. But the pattern isn't enough. Victor is careful. The deaths look natural. The paperwork is clean. The money trail is buried under layers of legitimate transactions. Antonio leaned forward. I need someone on the inside. Someone close to Victor. Someone he trusts. Someone like me. Someone like your daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. No. Absolutely not. I'm not putting Megan in danger. She's already in danger. Antonio's voice hardened. Don't you understand? Your daughter is exactly his type. A nurse. Good salary. The inheritance from her mother. And most importantly, a father who owes Victor his life. A father who would never suspect him. My blood ran cold. Linda's life insurance. The house we'd paid off together. Megan's savings. Her retirement account. Everything she'd worked for. Everything Victor now had access to as her husband. 3 weeks, Antonio said quietly. They've been married 3 weeks. In my research, Victor usually waits 6 months to a year before making his move. That gives us time. But not much. Time for what? To gather evidence. Real evidence. The kind that can put him in prison. Antonio reached under the coffee table and pulled out a thick folder. I have documents, bank records, witness statements, but it's not enough. I need proof of what he does during surgery. Proof of how he kills them. I stared at the folder. Inside were years of obsession, years of grief and rage channeled into a single purpose. Why should I trust you? I asked. I don't know you. I don't know if any of this is real. Antonio met my eyes. In them, I saw exhaustion, desperation, and underneath it all, a flicker of hope. Because you felt it too, he said simply. Last night, when I warned you, something in your gut told you to listen. Something told you I was telling the truth. He was right. I'd felt it the moment those 4 words left his lips. Get her out now. My gut had screamed. And my gut had never lied. What do you need me to do? I asked. Antonio's smile was grim but determined. First, we need to understand exactly what your daughter has signed since the wedding. Every document, every policy, everything Victor has asked her to put her name on. The folder sat between us like a loaded weapon. I reached for it. 5 years ago, I died on that table. I don't remember much about the surgery itself. Just fragments. The cold of the operating room, the mask coming down over my face, a voice telling me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7. The next thing I knew, I was floating somewhere dark and warm. No pain, no fear, just silence, and the distant feeling of being held by something larger than myself. Linda's face drifted through my mind. Megan's laughter, the smell of coffee on Sunday mornings, the weight of my father's hand on my shoulder, the day he taught me to wire my first outlet. Then light, blinding and harsh, the beeping of machines, the burn of a tube in my throat, and Linda's voice, breaking through everything else. He's awake. Oh God, he's awake. Rob, can you hear me? Rob, I'd come back from the dead. And the man who'd brought me back was Dr. Victor Chen. I sat in Antonio's cramped apartment, staring at the wall of evidence, and tried to reconcile those 2 truths. Victor had saved my life. Victor had killed 4 people for money. Both things were real. Both things were true. How was I supposed to fight a man I owed everything to? You're thinking about it, Antonio said quietly. The debt. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I understand. He set down his coffee mug. When I first realized what Victor had done, I felt the same way, grateful and horrified at the same time. How could the man who saved my life be the same man who tried to end it? Why did he save me? The question had been burning in my mind since last night. If he kills patients for money, why am I still alive? Antonio was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked to his wall of evidence. He pulled down a document I hadn't noticed before. A photocopy of a hospital intake form. This is your admission record from 5 years ago. I obtained it through unofficial channels. He handed it to me. Look at the financial section. I scanned the form. Insurance information. Emergency contacts. And there, in the box marked estimated net worth, a number that made me wince. $87,000. That was everything Linda and I had. Our savings, our retirement, the equity in our house. A lifetime of work reduced to a single disappointing figure. You weren't wealthy enough, Antonio said simply. Victor targets patients worth at least $500,000, preferably more. Your life insurance and assets didn't meet his threshold. I stared at the number. $87,000. The price tag that had saved my life. So he actually saved me, I said slowly. Because I wasn't worth killing. Ironic, isn't it? Antonio's smile was bitter. The same poverty that kept you up at night probably kept you alive. I thought about all those years of scraping by. The second jobs, the canceled vacations, the arguments with Linda about money we didn't have. We'd always felt like failures compared to our neighbors with their new cars and fancy vacations. But that failure had been a shield I never knew I needed. Megan is different, I said, the realization hitting me like a bucket of ice water. No, she's not. My daughter had done well for herself. The nursing career at a major hospital. The tech stocks she'd invested in during college that had exploded in value. The inheritance from Linda's life insurance. The house I'd signed over to her 2 years ago so she'd have security. I did the math in my head. The house alone was worth $400,000 now. Her investments, another $200,000 at least. The life insurance from her job. The retirement accounts. Megan was worth close to $1 million. More than enough to attract Victor's attention. Oh God, I whispered. Now you understand why I approached you. Antonio's voice was gentle but firm. Your daughter isn't just married to a killer. She's married to a killer who specifically chose her because of what she's worth. The room seemed to spin. I gripped the arm of the couch, trying to anchor myself. The wedding, I said. The fancy restaurant. The honeymoon in Italy. Was any of it real? His feelings for her? Antonio shrugged. I doubt Victor Chen has real feelings for anyone. But the performance? The charm? That's very real. That's how he operates. He makes them love him first. Makes them trust him completely. Then, when they're most vulnerable, when they'd never suspect him of anything, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I thought about Megan's face at that dinner. The way she looked at Victor. The complete trust. The absolute love. She'd never suspect him. Not in a million years. And that's exactly what he was counting on. I saved his life once, I said suddenly. Antonio frowned. 5 years ago. Before my surgery. Victor was a younger doctor then. One night, there was a fire in the parking garage at the hospital. Electrical fire. I was there visiting Linda's friend who was a patient. I saw the smoke. Heard someone calling for help. The memory surfaced, vivid and sharp. The heat. The smoke. A figure trapped behind a burning car. Victor was working late. His car wouldn't start. He was trying to fix it when the fire broke out. I pulled him out. Got him to safety before the whole section went up. I'd forgotten about it until now. It had seemed so insignificant compared to everything else. Just a moment of instinct, of one human helping another. He thanked me, I continued. Said he owed me one. 3 weeks later, I had my heart attack. He was the surgeon on call. He recognized my name. Antonio leaned forward. You think that's why he saved you? Because you saved him first? Maybe. Or maybe I just wasn't worth enough money. I don't know anymore. I rubbed my eyes. I don't know what's real and what's not. Then focus on what matters. Antonio's voice cut through my confusion. Your daughter. Her safety. Everything else is noise. He was right. The past didn't matter. Victor's motivations didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was keeping Megan alive. "Tell me what to do," I said. Antonio reached for the folder on the table. "First, we find out exactly how deep your daughter is in his trap. Then we figure out how to get her out." I took a deep breath. Push down the gratitude. Push down the debt. Victor Chen had saved my life. Now I had to destroy his. Eleanor Whitmore. 72 years old. Retired after 40 years of teaching third grade at Lincoln Elementary. Husband passed in 2015. No children. She volunteered at the local library every Tuesday and Thursday, helping kids with their reading. I stared at her photograph on Antonio's wall. She had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that had probably seen thousands of children grow up, move on, forget her name, but she'd kept teaching anyway, kept giving anyway. Victor had taken $1.8 million from her estate. She changed her will 6 weeks before the surgery, Antonio said, flipping through documents in the folder. Left everything to the Chen Foundation for cardiac research. Her original will divided her assets between 3 charities she'd supported for decades: Animal Shelter, Children's Literacy Program, her church, and no one questioned it? Who would? She was an elderly woman making end-of-life decisions. People change their wills all the time. Antonio pulled out another document. The foundation sent her a beautiful letter afterward, thanking her for her generosity, promising to honor her memory with groundbreaking research. I felt sick. Margaret Sullivan was next. Antonio moved to the second photograph. 68. Divorced twice. Her children blamed her for the family falling apart. They hadn't spoken in years. Let me guess. She left everything to Victor's charity, too. $2.2 million. Her ex-husband tried to contest the will, but the paperwork was airtight, signed and notarized. Witnessed by the same hospital social worker who handled Eleanor's case. I remembered what Antonio had said about the social worker. Resigned a week after his surgery. No forwarding address. Is she part of this? The social worker? I believe so. Her name is Karen Mitchell. She worked at Boston General for 3 years, then vanished. I've been trying to track her down, but it's like she never existed. Antonio shook his head. Victor covers his tracks well. Richard Donovan's photograph showed a man who looked like he'd spent his life giving orders. Strong jaw, cold eyes, the kind of face you'd see on a CEO or a general. Investment banker, Antonio continued. Made his fortune in the 80s and 90s. Never married. Said he didn't have time for family. $3.1 million to the foundation. He died on the operating table? Victor called it an unavoidable complication. Said Richard's heart was weaker than expected. But I found his pre-op evaluations. Antonio tapped another document. His heart was fine. Better than fine for a man his age. There was no medical reason for him to die during a routine bypass. I looked at the last photograph. Catherine Hayes. Gentle face. Gray hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was holding a cat in the picture. A orange tabby that looked half asleep in her arms. Tell me about her. Antonio's voice softened. Catherine was the reason I finally decided to act. She reminded me of my mother. Same age, same warmth, same love for her cats. He paused. I watched her for 3 months before her surgery. Saw her walking to the grocery store. Feeding birds in the park. Living her quiet little life. You couldn't warn her? I tried. The words came out rough, painful. I approached her outside her apartment building, told her to find another surgeon, told her Victor was dangerous. Antonio's hands clenched. She smiled at me, patted my arm. Said Dr. Chen came highly recommended, and she was sure everything would be fine. She didn't believe you. Why would she? I was a stranger. He was a celebrated surgeon with awards on his wall and articles in medical journals. Antonio's voice cracked. She died 3 weeks later. Allergic reaction to medication. Except, she wasn't allergic to anything. I checked her medical records. No allergies listed anywhere. The room fell silent. I looked at the 4 photographs. 4 lives. 4 people who'd trusted the wrong man. How does he do it? I asked. During surgery, I mean. How does he kill them without anyone noticing? Antonio reached for a thick folder I hadn't seen before. Medical records, autopsy reports, expert analyses he'd paid for out of his own pocket. Potassium chloride, he said. It's used in lethal injections because it stops the heart instantly. But it's also a common medication in hospitals, used to treat low potassium levels. In the right dose, it saves lives. In the wrong dose, it looks like natural heart failure. Exactly. And during cardiac surgery, the patient is already on dozens of medications. Their heart is already stressed. If something goes wrong, who's going to question the surgeon? Antonio spread the documents across the coffee table. Victor doesn't even have to administer it himself. He has help. The anesthesiologist? Dr. Helen Park. She's been in the operating room for every single one of these deaths. And I found payments from the foundation to a company she owns. Over $300,000 in consulting fees over the past 5 years. I stared at the financial records. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. A web of transactions designed to hide the truth. This is enough, I said. This has to be enough to go to the police. It's not. Antonio's voice was flat. I've shown all of this to the Boston PD. They investigated for 3 weeks and found nothing conclusive. Victor's lawyers buried them in paperwork. The medical board reviewed his cases and found no evidence of malpractice. Then what do? We need more. We need someone on the inside. Someone who can access records. Someone who can document what Victor is planning before he does it. Antonio met my eyes. Your daughter works at that hospital. She has access to patient files. And more importantly, she's married to Victor. She can see things we can't. My stomach dropped. No, I already told you. I'm not putting Megan in danger. She's already in danger. Antonio pulled out one more document. I obtained this yesterday. It's a life insurance policy taken out 3 days after your daughter's wedding. Beneficiary, Victor Chen. Value, $750,000. The numbers swam before my eyes. $750,000 added to Megan's existing assets. Over $1 million total, more than any of his previous victims. He's already started, Antonio said quietly. The paperwork is in place. The foundation is ready to receive. All Victor needs now is a tragedy. I thought about Megan. Her smile, her laugh, the way she'd held my hand when Linda was dying, the way she'd told me everything would be okay, even when we both knew it wouldn't. What do I need to do? Antonio handed me a flash drive. First, we find out exactly what else your daughter has signed. Boston Police Department's cold case unit occupied a forgotten corner of the 3rd floor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Filing cabinets lined the walls like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. The air smelled of old coffee and older disappointments. Detective Sarah Walsh looked exactly like someone who'd spent 20 years chasing ghosts. She was maybe 42, with short black hair that hadn't seen a stylist in months, and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. No makeup, no jewelry except a simple wedding band. She wore a blazer that had probably been fashionable during the Clinton administration. Mr. Callahan. She didn't stand when I entered, just gestured at the chair across from her cluttered desk. Antonio Reyes said you'd be coming. Have a seat. I sat. The chair squeaked in protest. You know Antonio? We've met. Walsh leaned back, studying me with the practiced patience of a predator. He's been in here a dozen times over the past 2 years, always with new evidence, new theories, new reasons why I should arrest Dr. Victor Chen, and you haven't. Can't arrest someone without probable cause, Mr. Callahan. And despite Mr. Reyes's extensive research, we don't have it. She pulled a thick folder from her desk drawer. Trust me, I've looked. I stared at the folder. It was worn at the edges, like it had been opened and closed 100 times. You believe him, don't you? Antonio, I mean. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed and opened the folder. 3 years ago, I caught a case. Elderly woman named Patricia Hoffman, 81 years old, died of heart failure 6 weeks after successful cardiac surgery at Boston General. Her nephew filed a complaint. Said his aunt's will had been changed right before the surgery. Everything went to a charity he'd never heard of. The Chen Foundation. You've done your homework. Walsh nodded. I looked into it. Found the same pattern Antonio had found. Wealthy patients. No close family. Wills changed before surgery. Deaths within a year. What happened? I took it to my captain. He took it to the DA. The DA took it to Victor Chen's lawyers. Walsh's voice went flat. 2 weeks later, I was transferred to cold case. The investigation was closed. Insufficient evidence. I felt a chill. They buried it. Victor Chen is a very wealthy man with very powerful friends. He donates to police charities, hosts fundraisers for city officials, sits on the board of 3 hospitals. Walsh closed the folder. Men like him don't go to prison. Men like him don't even get investigated. Unless someone hands us proof so undeniable that even his lawyers can't spin it. That's why I'm here, I figured. Walsh leaned forward. Antonio says your daughter married Victor 3 weeks ago. Is that true? And you believe she's in danger? I thought about the insurance policy. $750,000. Victor's name as beneficiary. I know she is. Walsh studied me for a long moment. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. I've been keeping this case file alive on my own time, off the books, collecting information, waiting for something I could actually use. She tapped the folder. I received an anonymous tip about Victor 6 months ago. Someone inside the hospital. They said there were irregularities in his surgical records. Patients who should have survived, but didn't. Medication dosages that didn't match the charts. Who was the tipster? Anonymous. They used a burner email that went dead after 3 messages. Walsh paused. But based on the information they provided, I believe it was someone with access to the operating room. Someone who'd witnessed things they shouldn't have. Dr. Helen Park? Walsh's eyebrows rose slightly. Antonio told you about her? He thinks she's Victor's accomplice. She might be. Or she might be a scared witness who knows too much and is trying to do the right thing without getting killed. Walsh shrugged. Either way, she's key to this. If we can get her to talk on the record, to testify about what happens in that operating room, Victor's done. How do we do that? That's the problem. Helen Park is protected. She's never alone. Victor makes sure of it. They have lunch together every day. She drives straight home after work to a gated community where I can't follow without a warrant. Walsh's frustration was palpable. I've tried approaching her twice. Both times, she refused to speak and reported me to my captain. So she's afraid of Victor. Terrified. Which tells me she knows exactly what he is. Walsh stood and walked to the window. The view was a brick wall. Mr. Callahan, I'm going to be honest with you. I want to nail Victor Chen more than I've wanted anything in my career, but I can't do it alone. I need someone inside his circle. Someone who can gather evidence. Someone he trusts. Antonio said the same thing. Antonio's right. Walsh turned to face me. Your daughter works at Boston General. She has access to patient records, surgical schedules, medication logs, and more importantly, she's married to Victor. She can get close to him in ways none of us can. She doesn't know anything about this. She loves him. Then you have a choice to make. Walsh's voice softened slightly. You can protect your daughter from the truth and hope Victor never makes his move. Or you can tell her what you've learned and give her a chance to protect herself. The words hung in the air between us. If I tell her, I said slowly, and she doesn't believe me, then Victor will know someone's investigating him, and he'll accelerate his timeline. Walsh didn't sugarcoat it. These men don't like loose ends. If he thinks Megan suspects him, he'll act fast. Could be weeks, could be days. I felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on my chest. What would you do? I asked. If it was your daughter? Walsh was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'd pray I was wrong about everything. And then I'd tell her anyway. She met my eyes. Because the alternative is attending her funeral and knowing I could have stopped it. She handed me her card. Call me when you're ready. Day or night. And Mr. Callahan? I paused at the door. Don't try to take Victor down alone. He's survived investigations before. He knows how to protect himself. Her eyes were hard. Don't become another name in my cold case files. Victor suggested coffee. Just the two of us. The invitation came 3 days after my meeting with Detective Walsh. A casual text message that made my blood run cold. Rob, we should catch up. Father-in-law bonding time. How about that cafe on Newbury Street? Tomorrow at 10? I stared at my phone for a full minute before responding. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Sounds good. See you there. 3 words. Simple. Innocent. The kind of response a loving father-in-law would send. I didn't sleep that night. The cafe was one of those trendy Boston spots where the coffee cost $8 and the pastries looked like art installations. Victor was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with a view of both entrances. Classic predator positioning. I'd read about it in a crime book Linda used to love. Rob. He stood and embraced me. Warm, genuine, the perfect son-in-law. Thanks for coming. Of course. I sat across from him, trying to keep my expression neutral. Everything okay? Megan didn't mention anything. Everything's fine. Better than fine. Victor smiled. That easy, charming smile I'd trusted for 5 years. I just realized we haven't spent much time together. Just us. Man to man. A waitress appeared. Young. Pretty. She smiled at Victor like he was a movie star. He ordered some complicated espresso drink. I asked for black coffee. Simple. Like my father drank it. Like I'd always drink it. So. Victor said once she'd gone. How have you been? Megan mentioned you seemed tired at dinner the other night. The dinner. Ristorante Lucia. The night, everything changed. Just getting old, I said. Body doesn't recover like it used to. You should come in for a checkup. I could take a look at your heart. Make sure everything's still running smoothly. He tapped his chest. The bypass I gave you should last another decade at least. But it never hurts to be careful. The bypass he gave me. The gift of life. The debt I could never repay. Maybe I will, I said. Our drinks arrived. Victor took a sip of his espresso, watching me over the rim of his cup. There was something different in his eyes today. Something calculating beneath the warmth. That waiter at the restaurant, he said casually. The older gentleman who came to our table. Did you know him? My heart stopped. The waiter? I forced confusion into my voice. I don't remember any waiter specifically. Why? No reason. Megan mentioned he seemed to upset you. Thought maybe he was an old friend. He knows. The thought screamed through my mind. He knows something. Must have been someone else, I said. I don't remember being upset. Victor nodded slowly. His fingers traced the edge of his cup. Long, elegant fingers. Surgeon's fingers. Killer's fingers. You know, Rob, I've always admired you. The way you built a life with your hands. Honest work. Simple pleasures. He leaned forward slightly. Men like us. We understand the value of loyalty. Of protecting what matters. What do you mean? I mean family. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Megan is everything to me. I would do anything to keep her safe. To keep our life together safe. He paused. I hope you feel the same way. The words hung between us like a blade. Of course I do, I said carefully. She's my daughter. Then we understand each other. Victor leaned back, the tension draining from his posture. I just wanted to make sure. There are people in this world who spread lies, who try to destroy what good men build. I wouldn't want anyone filling your head with stories. Stories. Lies. Has someone been spreading stories about you? I asked, keeping my voice innocent. Nothing specific. Just paranoia. Probably. Victor laughed, but it sounded hollow. You know how it is. Successful people attract jealousy. There's always someone who wants to tear you down. I thought about Antonio in his cramped apartment, about Detective Walsh in her forgotten corner of the police station, about the 4 names on that wall: Eleanor, Margaret, Richard, Catherine. Anyone in particular? Victor's eyes met mine. For just a moment, the mask slipped. I saw something cold beneath, something predatory, something that recognized a threat when it saw one. No one important, he said softly. Ghosts. The word sent ice down my spine. Was he talking about his victims, or was he talking about Antonio, who was supposed to be dead? Well, I said, forcing a smile, you've got nothing to worry about from me. I'm just an old electrician who's grateful his daughter found a good man. Victor studied me for a long moment. Then his smile returned, warm and easy. I knew I could count on you, Rob. Family looks out for family. We finished our coffee. Made small talk about the Red Sox. Discussed Thanksgiving plans. All perfectly normal. All perfectly terrifying. As we stood to leave, Victor put his hand on my shoulder. The same hand that had held my heart. The same hand that had stopped 4 others. By the way, he said casually, that building where you parked the other night, when you visited that apartment in Dorchester. I froze. The one on Harbor Street. Victor's grip tightened slightly. Rough neighborhood. Not the kind of place for a man your age to be wandering alone at night. He knew. He'd been watching me. I was visiting an old friend, I managed. From my electrician days. Of course you were. Victor released my shoulder. His smile was pleasant. His eyes were death. Just be careful, Rob. I'd hate for anything to happen to you. Megan would be devastated. He walked away without looking back. Confident. Controlled. A man who knew exactly where all the pieces were on the board. I stood on the sidewalk, my legs shaking, my heart pounding. Victor Chen knew I was investigating him. He'd known since the restaurant. Maybe before. He'd set up this entire meeting to let me know he was watching. To warn me. To see how I'd react. And I had walked right into his trap. I pulled out my phone and called Antonio. We have a problem, I said. He knows. It hit me like a freight train on the drive home. The dinner at Ristorante Lucia. The waiter who wasn't a waiter. The note pressed into my palm. All of it had been too easy. Too convenient. Victor had known from the beginning. He'd seen Antonio approach our table. Maybe he'd even recognized him. The man who was supposed to be dead, suddenly appearing in a crowded restaurant, whispering warnings to his new father-in-law. And instead of panicking, Victor had done what Victor always did. He'd adapted. He'd used it. The entire evening had been a test. A trap. Victor wanted to see who would come for him, who would start asking questions, who would visit Antonio's apartment in the middle of the night. And I had walked right into it. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My phone sat on the passenger seat, Antonio's panicked voice still echoing in my memory. Get out of Boston. Take Megan and run. He'll move fast now. But running wasn't an option. Megan wouldn't come with me. She didn't know. She didn't believe. That had to change. I found her at home that evening. They're home now. The brownstone in Beacon Hill that Victor had bought as a wedding gift. 3 stories of old money elegance with a view of the Charles River. Dad? Megan looked surprised when she opened the door. What are you doing here? Victor said you 2 had coffee this morning. We did. I stepped inside, glancing around. Is he home? No. He's at the hospital. Late surgery. She led me to the living room. Everything was tasteful and expensive. Furniture that cost more than my truck. Art on the walls that probably belonged in a museum. Is everything okay? You look pale. I sat on the couch. My legs felt unsteady. My heart was doing that thing again. That flutter that made me reach for my pills. Dad, you're scaring me. Megan sat beside me, her hand on my arm. What's wrong? I looked at my daughter. Her mother's auburn hair. My blue eyes. The same trusting expression she'd had at 5 years old when I'd promised her the monsters under the bed weren't real. How do you tell your child that the monster is sleeping beside her? Megan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen. Really listen. Even if it sounds crazy. Crossetin, her expression shifted. Concern mixed with something else. Wariness. Okay, I took a deep breath. The night of our dinner. At the restaurant. A man approached our table. He gave me a note. A warning. A warning about what? About Victor. Megan's face hardened. Dad, just listen. Please. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos I'd taken at Antonio's apartment, the wall of evidence, the victim photographs, the financial records. His name is Antonio Reyes. He was Victor's patient 3 years ago. He was supposed to die during surgery, but he survived, and he's been investigating Victor ever since. I showed her the photos, one by one. Eleanor Whitmore, Margaret Sullivan, Richard Donovan, Catherine Hayes. 4 faces, 4 lives, 4 deaths that weren't accidents. Megan stared at the screen. Her expression was unreadable. Dad, this is insane. I know how it sounds. Do you? Her voice rose. You're showing me conspiracy theories from some stranger and telling me my husband is a murderer. Victor saved your life, Dad. He saved your life. I know. Then how can you believe this? The question hung between us. The same question I'd been asking myself for days, because I felt it. I said quietly. At that dinner, when Antonio warned me, something in my gut told me he was telling the truth. The same instinct that's kept me alive for 60 years. Instinct isn't evidence. No. But this is. I pulled up another photo. The life insurance policy. Victor's name as beneficiary. $750,000. He took this out 3 days after your wedding. Did you know about it? Megan's face went pale. He said, it was standard, she whispered. For married couples. He said, what else did he have you sign? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small. A lot of things. Legal stuff. He said he'd handle the details so I wouldn't have to worry. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. He said it was easier that way, just like he did with the others. Just like he always does. Megan stood abruptly, walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. This can't be real. I wish it wasn't. Victor loves me. He loves me. Dad. I went to her, put my hands on her shoulders, felt her trembling. Maybe he does, in his own way. But men like Victor, love doesn't mean the same thing to them. Love is possession. Love is control. Love is something they take, not something they give. Tears were streaming down her face now. What am I supposed to do? I married him. I live in his house. I work at his hospital. Her voice cracked. I love him. I pulled her close. Held her the way I had when she was little. When a hug from Dad could fix anything. I know, sweetheart. I know. We stood there for a long time. Father and daughter. The truth, like a third presence in the room. What happens now? Megan finally asked. Detective Walsh, Boston PD. And you want me to get it? No. I pulled back, looked into her eyes. I want you to be safe. I want you to pack a bag and come home with me tonight. We can figure out the rest later. Megan shook her head slowly. If I run, he'll know something's wrong. He'll disappear. Find another victim. She wiped her eyes. Those women on the wall. Eleanor, Margaret, Catherine. They didn't have anyone to warn them. I do. Megan, I'm a nurse, Dad. I have access to patient records, surgical schedules, medication logs. Her voice steadied. If Victor is really doing what you say, there's evidence at that hospital, and I can find it. Pride and terror warred in my chest. It's too dangerous. So is doing nothing. She met my eyes, her mother's courage looking back at me. You taught me that, remember? When something's wrong, you don't look away. You fix it. I had taught her that. A lifetime ago. I never imagined it would put her in the crosshairs of a killer. We do this together, I said. You don't take any risks alone. Promise me. Megan nodded. I promise. Outside, the sun was setting over Boston. Somewhere in that city, Victor Chen was finishing his surgery, coming home to his perfect wife, his perfect life. He didn't know his perfect trap had just snapped shut around him. Detective Walsh called at 6 in the morning. I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with cold coffee and colder fear. Sleep had become a stranger since that meeting with Victor. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like a threat. We found something, Walsh said without preamble. Can you come to the station? 30 minutes later, I was back in her cramped office. Antonio was already there, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking more than usual, the hunted look of a man who knew his time was running out. Tell him, Walsh said. Antonio slid a folder across the desk. Inside were bank statements, dozens of them, transactions highlighted in yellow. Dr. Helen Park, he said. Victor's anesthesiologist. I've been tracking her finances for 2 years. Look at this. I scanned the documents. The numbers swam before my eyes until patterns emerged. Regular deposits, large amounts, always from the same source. The Chen Foundation, I said. $347,000 over 5 years. Antonio's voice was tight. Consulting fees. Except Helen Park has never done any consulting. She's never published a paper, never spoken at a conference. The money is payment for something else. Walsh leaned forward. We pulled her surgical records. Every patient who died under Victor's care. Helen Park was the anesthesiologist. Every single one. She's his accomplice. More than that. Walsh pulled out another document. She controls the medication during surgery, the dosages, the timing. If Victor wanted to kill someone on his table, he'd need Helen to adjust the anesthesia, keep the patient under while he did whatever he did. Make sure no one noticed anything wrong. I thought about my own surgery. 5 years ago, had Helen Park been there? Had she held my life in her hands too? Why would she help him? Money, obviously. Antonio gestured at the bank statements. But there's more. I did some digging into her background. Helen Park was drowning in debt 10 years ago. Medical school loans, a failed marriage, a gambling problem she kept hidden from the hospital. Victor found out, Walsh continued. He offered her a way out, pay off her debts in exchange for her cooperation. By the time she realized what she was really agreeing to, she was in too deep. So she's trapped and terrified. Walsh stood and walked to her window. That same brick wall view. I've approached her twice. Both times she shut me down completely, reported me to my captain, said I was harassing her. Because Victor told her to, probably. But here's the thing. Walsh turned back to face us. The second time I approached her, she was different. Scared, yes, but something else too. She kept looking over her shoulder, checking her phone. Like she was expecting someone. You think she wants out? I think she's been wanting out for years. She just doesn't know how. Walsh sat back down. Helen Park is the key to this whole thing. If she testifies about what happens in that operating room, Victor goes to prison. But she won't talk to me. She won't talk to anyone official. Then who will she talk to? Walsh and Antonio exchanged a look. Then, they both turned to me. Someone who understands what it's like to be trapped, Antonio said quietly. Someone who's been in Victor's orbit. Someone who isn't a cop or a threat. You want me to approach her, not you. Walsh shook her head. Your daughter. My blood went cold. No, absolutely not. Rob, listen to me. Walsh's voice was firm but gentle. Megan works at the same hospital. They know each other professionally. If Megan approaches Helen as a colleague, as someone who's starting to have doubts about her husband, Helen might open up, or she might run straight to Victor. That's a risk, yes. Walsh didn't sugarcoat it. But it's our best chance. Helen is scared. She's looking for a way out. If Megan can show her that she's not alone, that there are people who can protect her. You're asking me to put my daughter in the crosshairs. She's already in the crosshairs. Antonio's voice was harsh. Victor knows you're investigating him. How long before he decides Megan is a liability? How long before she becomes his next victim instead of his wife? The words hit like physical blows. There has to be another way. There isn't. Walsh spread her hands. We've tried everything else. Anonymous tips, official investigations, forensic accountants. Nothing sticks. Victor is too careful. His lawyers are too good. The only way to bring him down is from the inside. I sat in silence. The weight of impossible choices crushing my chest. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Found something. Meet me at Dad's house. 8 p.m. Don't tell anyone. I stared at the screen. My daughter was already in deeper than I'd wanted. Already taking risks I'd begged her to avoid. What is it? Walsh asked. Megan. I showed them the text. She found something at the hospital. Antonio leaned forward. What did she find? I don't know yet. I stood, pocketing my phone. But I'm going to find out. Be careful, Walsh said. If Victor suspects she's working against him, I know. I was already at the door. I'll call you, after I talk to her. The drive home felt endless. Every red light was an eternity. Every slow driver was a personal enemy. My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. What had Megan found? Had she been careful? Had anyone seen her? Had Victor? When I finally pulled into my driveway, Megan's car was already there. She was waiting on the porch, hugging herself against the October chill. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red. Dad! She ran to me the moment I stepped out of the truck. Dad! I found it. I found the proof. What proof? What did you find? She pulled out her phone. Showed me a photograph of a medical chart. Medication logs, she said. From Victor's surgeries. The potassium chloride dosages don't match what's recorded in the official files. Someone's been altering the records after the fact. Helen Park. It has to be. She's the only one with access. Megan's voice shook. Dad, this is it. This is the evidence we need. I looked at the photograph. Numbers and codes I didn't fully understand. But I understood enough. We had him. Now we just had to survive long enough to use it. Megan noticed it during a night shift 3 days earlier. We sat at my kitchen table. The medication logs spread between us like a map to buried treasure. Outside, October rain tapped against the windows. Inside, my daughter walked me through what she'd found. I wasn't even looking for it, she said, her voice still shaky. I was covering for another nurse in the cardiac unit. Post-op rounds, checking vitals, updating charts. Standard stuff. What happened? I was reviewing a patient file. Mr. Henderson, 73 years old, bypass surgery 2 weeks ago. Megan pulled out a photocopy. His recovery was going great. Walking the halls, joking with the nurses. Everyone said he'd be home by Friday. But something in his chart caught my eye. The potassium chloride dosage from his surgery. It was listed as 200 milliequivalents. I didn't know what that meant. But I could tell from her face it was wrong. That's way too high, Megan explained. Normal dose for cardiac surgery is 40 to 60 milliequivalents. 200 would cause immediate cardiac arrest. There's no way Mr. Henderson survived that dose. So someone made a mistake in the records? That's what I thought at first. Typo. Wrong number. Happens sometimes. She shook her head. But then I started looking at other files. Other patients. Victor's patients. She spread more photocopies across the table. Chart after chart. Name after name. Every single one of them has the same pattern. The dosages recorded in the surgical logs don't match what's in the post-op records. And the discrepancies only appear in cases where the patient died. I stared at the papers. Numbers and medical jargon I barely understood, but even I could see it. A pattern. A deliberate, calculated pattern. He's changing the records, I said. Not him. Helen Park. Megan pointed to a signature at the bottom of one chart. She's the only one who signs off on the anesthesia logs. She's the only one with access to both the surgical records and the post-op files. She covers his tracks. Exactly. After each surgery, she goes back and adjusts the numbers, makes everything look normal. No one would notice unless they were specifically looking for it. Megan's voice hardened, unless they knew what to look for. I thought about Antonio's wall. The years of research, the names of the dead, the patients who died. Eleanor Whitmore, Margaret Sullivan, the others. Their records would show the same pattern. I couldn't access files that old without raising red flags. But I'd bet my nursing license on it. She pulled out one more document. This one was different. Handwritten notes on a yellow legal pad. After I found the discrepancy, I started watching. Not just the files, the people. Megan's eyes met mine. Helen Park has been acting strange for weeks. Nervous. Jumpy. She keeps looking over her shoulder like she expects someone to be there. Walsh said the same thing. There's more. Last Thursday, I saw her in the parking garage after her shift. She was sitting in her car. Just sitting there. For 20 minutes. Megan paused. She was crying. Dad. Sobbing like her heart was breaking. I pictured it. A middle-aged woman alone in a concrete tomb, weeping for crimes she'd helped commit. Trapped by her own choices. Terrified of the monster she'd created alongside. She wants out, I said. I think so. But she doesn't know how. Victor has too much on her. If she talks, she goes to prison too. If she runs, he'll find her. Megan's voice softened. She's not a monster, Dad. She's a coward who made terrible choices, and now she can't see any way to fix them. Can you reach her? Get her to trust you? I've been trying. Small conversations in the break room. Asking about her weekend. Complimenting her work. Megan sighed. She's polite but distant. Friendly but guarded. She doesn't let anyone get close. Because Victor is watching. Because Victor is always watching. We sat in silence for a moment. The rain had intensified, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. There's something else, Megan said quietly. Something I haven't told you yet. My heart clenched. She pulled out her phone. Showed me a text conversation. Victor. Working late tonight? Megan. Just finishing some charts. Home by 10. Victor. Take your time. I know how dedicated you are. Victor. By the way, I noticed you've been spending a lot of time in the records room. Everything okay? I read the messages 3 times. Each time, the words felt more sinister. He knows, I said. He suspects. Megan's face was pale but determined. He hasn't confronted me directly, but he's asking questions, probing, testing. You need to stop. Right now. No more snooping. No more, Dad. She cut me off. I'm not stopping. Not now. Not when we're this close. Megan, he'll kill you. He'll kill me anyway. Her voice was steady. Certain. The insurance policy. The will changes. Everything Antonio told you about his pattern. It's already in motion, whether I investigate or not. Victor has plans for me. The truth of her words hit like a physical blow. At least this way, she continued. I have a chance to fight back, to expose him before he can hurt me, to save whoever his next victim would be. I wanted to argue, wanted to throw her over my shoulder and drive away from Boston and never look back. But she was right. Running wouldn't save her. Victor would find her. Men like him always did. The only way out was through. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Helen Park. She won't talk to cops. She barely talks to colleagues. But she might talk to someone who's in the same situation she is." Megan took a deep breath. "Someone married to a monster. Someone who just found out the truth. You want to tell her you know about Victor. I want to show her she's not alone. That there's a way out that doesn't end in prison or a body bag." Megan's eyes glistened. "I want to offer her what no one ever offered her before. Hope." My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Walsh. "Victor just requested OR time for next Tuesday. Patient is a 71-year-old widow named Barbara Chen. Net worth, $2.3 million. No close family." I showed Megan the message. Her face went white. "He's not stopping," she whispered. "Even with us investigating." "Then we stop him first." Megan nodded, wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll talk to Helen tomorrow." She came to my door at midnight. I'd been waiting, pacing, checking my phone every 30 seconds like a nervous teenager. Megan had texted at 6 to say she was going to approach Helen after their shift ended. That was 6 hours ago. 6 hours of silence that felt like 6 years. When I finally heard the knock, I nearly ripped the door off its hinges. Megan stood on my porch, rain dripping from her hair, mascara streaked down her cheeks. But she was smiling. A broken, exhausted, triumphant smile. "She talked," Megan whispered. I pulled her inside, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, made her sit at the kitchen table. My hands shook. As I poured coffee neither of us would drink. "Tell me everything." Megan took a shuddering breath. I found her in the parking garage. Same place I'd seen her crying before. She was just sitting in her car, staring at nothing. Megan's voice was hoarse. I knocked on her window. She looked terrified, like she thought I was there to hurt her. "What did you say?" I said I knew. About Victor. About what he does. About what she helps him do. Megan wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. I thought she'd run, or scream, or call security. But she just broke. Broke how? She started crying. Not the quiet crying I'd seen before. Deep, ugly sobs, like something inside her had finally shattered. Megan's eyes glistened at the memory. She said she'd been waiting, waiting for someone to find out, waiting for it to be over. I pictured it. 2 women, in a dark parking garage, bound together by the man who'd trapped them both. "She told you everything?" "Everything." Megan pulled a flash drive from her pocket, set it on the table between us, and she gave me this. I stared at the small black rectangle. Such an insignificant thing to contain so much evil. What's on it? Copies of the original surgical records, before she altered them. Video files from the operating room security cameras. Audio recordings of conversations with Victor. Megan's voice hardened. She's been collecting evidence for 2 years, building her own insurance policy in case Victor ever decided she was a liability. She was going to use it against him? She was going to use it to survive. If Victor ever turned on her, she planned to release everything. Mutually assured destruction. Megan shook her head. But she was too scared to act, too scared to run, too scared to do anything except keep adding to the collection and hoping she'd never have to use it. I reached for the flash drive. It was warm from Megan's pocket. Warm, like a living thing. This is enough to convict him? More than enough. The original records show lethal doses of potassium chloride administered during surgery. The videos show Victor signaling Helen when to increase the medication. The audio, Megan paused. The audio is Victor talking about his patients like they're livestock. My stomach turned. The man who'd saved my life. The man who'd held my heart in his hands. Discussing murder, like a business transaction. What about Helen? If she testifies, she'll go to prison. She knows that. But she's ready. Megan's voice softened. She said she's been dead inside for years. At least in prison she might finally be able to sleep. I thought about the woman I'd never met. The woman who'd helped kill 4 people. The woman who'd spent years drowning in guilt and fear and self-hatred. Evil came in many forms. Some people chose it. Others fell into it and couldn't find their way out. Where is she now? Safe house. Detective Walsh arranged it. Megan pulled out her phone, showed me a text from Walsh. Helen's in protective custody. She's already given a preliminary statement. Walsh is presenting everything to the DA first thing tomorrow. Tomorrow. After weeks of fear and investigation and sleepless nights, it was finally happening. What about Victor? Does he know? Not yet. Helen called in sick for tonight's shift. Told the hospital she had food poisoning. Megan's jaw tightened. But he'll figure it out soon. He always does. Then you need to leave. Tonight. Come home with me until my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Mr. Callahan. Victor's voice, smooth as silk. I believe you have something that belongs to me. My blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence, Rob. All pretense of warmth was gone. Helen Park disappeared tonight. My wife has been sneaking around the hospital for weeks. And you've been meeting with that detective who should have learned her lesson years ago. Megan's face had gone white. She could hear his voice through the speaker. It's over, Victor, I said. The police have everything. Helen's evidence. Silence on the other end. Then, incredibly, laughter. You think this is the first time someone's tried to stop me? The first time a witness has gathered evidence? Victor's voice was cold and amused. Evidence can be discredited. Witnesses can be silenced. Investigations can be buried. Not this time. Perhaps not. But here's what you need to understand, Rob. His voice dropped to a whisper. Even if you take me down, even if I spend the rest of my life in prison, I will make sure you lose everything first. Meaning what? Meaning Antonio Reyes is currently driving to the harbor. He thinks he's meeting someone who can help him. He's wrong. Victor paused. And as for my lovely wife, well, perhaps you should check where she parked her car tonight. The line went dead. I stared at Megan. She stared back. Antonio, I breathed, and he knows where I am. Megan was already reaching for her phone. Dad, he's planned for this. He's been planning for years. I grabbed my keys, grabbed my jacket, grabbed the flash drive, and shoved it deep in my pocket. Call Walsh. Tell her Antonio's in danger. Tell her to send units to the harbor. What about me? Victor said. You're coming with me. We're not separating. Not tonight. I pulled her toward the door. Victor wants to play games? Fine. But he's not the only one who can plan ahead. We ran into the rain, into the night, into a battle that had been building for years. Antonio first. Then Victor. One way or another, this ended tonight. Helen Park's hands shook as she lit her third cigarette in 10 minutes. We found her at the safe house, a nondescript apartment in Somerville that Detective Walsh had arranged through unofficial channels. The building looked like every other three-decker in the neighborhood. Faded siding, crooked shutters, the kind of place where people minded their own business. Inside, Helen sat at a folding table, surrounded by stacks of documents. She was smaller than I'd imagined, mid-40s, but looking older. Gray streaks in her black hair that hadn't been there in the hospital photos I'd seen. Eyes that had seen too much and couldn't unsee any of it. Mr. Callahan. I didn't know what to say. This woman had helped kill 4 people. She'd assisted in surgeries designed to end lives. She'd altered records to cover up murder, but she'd also been a victim. Trapped by debt and fear, and a monster who knew exactly how to exploit human weakness. We don't have time for apologies, Walsh said, spreading a map across the table. Victor called Rob 30 minutes ago. He knows Helen's gone. He knows we have evidence, and he's lured Antonio to the harbor, Harbor Point. Helen's cigarette trembled. Victor owns a warehouse there. Off the books. Uses a shell company. You knew about this? I knew about a lot of things I tried to forget. Helen crushed out her cigarette. That warehouse is where he keeps his backup files. Physical copies of everything. In case the digital evidence ever gets destroyed. Walsh leaned forward. What kind of backup files? Financial records. Property transfers. Copies of the forged wills. Helen's voice steadied as she talked, finding strength in confession. And something else. A journal. Victor keeps a journal of every patient he's. Every patient. A journal? Megan's face was pale. You mean he writes about them? About killing them? He calls it his case study. Claims it's for research purposes. Helen's laugh was bitter. He's proud of what he does. Thinks he's some kind of genius. The journal is his trophy case. The room fell silent. A journal. Written proof of Victor Chen's crimes in his own hand. That's why he went after Antonio, I said, the pieces clicking together. He's not just trying to kill a witness. He's protecting his trophies. And Antonio walked right into it. Walsh grabbed her phone. I've got units heading to Harbor Point now. But Victor will have prepared for that. He always prepares. Helen stood, steadier now. That's why he's survived this long. He thinks 10 moves ahead. Plans for every contingency. Then we need to think 11 moves ahead. I turned to Helen. You know him better than anyone. How do we stop him? Helen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold and precise. Victor has one weakness, one thing he can't plan around. She met my eyes. His ego. He's spent 15 years believing he's the smartest person in every room, that no one could ever outsmart him. And he's wrong. Helen pulled out her phone. I've been preparing for this day for 2 years, building my own contingencies, my own traps. She showed us the screen. This is a dead man's switch. If I don't enter a code every 12 hours, an email goes out automatically to every major news outlet in New England. FBI, State Police, Medical Board, everyone. Walsh's eyes widened. You have copies of everything? Multiple copies. Cloud storage. Physical drives in safety deposit boxes. Victor taught me well. Always. Have insurance. Then why haven't you used it? Why? Let him keep killing. Helen's face crumpled. Because I was a coward. Because I thought if I just kept my head down, kept doing what he asked, he'd let me live. Because I convinced myself that the next victim wouldn't be my fault. The words hung in the air like an accusation, but I was wrong. Helen's voice broke. Every death was my fault. Every life he took, I helped him take it. And tonight, that ends. She turned to Walsh. I'll testify. On record. Everything I know. Every surgery. Every patient. Every dollar. You'll go to prison. I know. Helen straightened her shoulders. But maybe I'll finally be able to sleep. Walsh nodded slowly. We need to move. Antonio's been at that warehouse for almost an hour now. If Victor won't kill him quickly. Helen cut her off. He'll want to talk first. To gloat, to explain how clever he's been. Disgust colored her voice. He always does. Then we still have time. I grabbed my keys. Megan, you stay here with Helen. Walsh and I will. No. Megan's voice was steel. I'm not hiding while you risk your life. Victor is my husband. This is my fight too. Megan. Dad. She took my hands. Her grip was strong. Sure. Mom used to say that Callahans don't run from trouble. We face it head on. Linda's words. From a lifetime ago, before cancer stole her from us, before I learned that the man who saved my life was a monster. She also said we look out for each other, I replied. No matter what, then let me look out for you. Megan squeezed my hands. We do this together. All of us. I looked at Walsh. At Helen. At my daughter. Standing tall despite everything. Together, I agreed. We moved out into the night, Walsh drove, lights off, cutting through back streets toward the harbor. Helen rode shotgun, directing her to the warehouse. Megan and I sat in the back, holding hands like we had when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. The harbor emerged from the darkness. Industrial, abandoned, the smell of salt and rust and decay. There. Helen pointed to a building at the end of a pier. Lights glowed behind filthy windows. A single car parked outside. Victor's car. He's here, Walsh said, reaching for her radio. Backup is 3 minutes out. Antonio might not have 3 minutes. I opened my door. I'm going in. Rob. Wait. But I was already moving. Running toward the warehouse. Toward Victor. Toward the confrontation that had been building since a waiter who wasn't a waiter pressed a note into my hand. The surgeon's hands had taken enough lives. Tonight, they would take no more. The call came at 3:17 in the morning, but I was already running before my phone ever rang. Harbor Point smelled of rotting fish and diesel fuel. Fog rolled in from the water, turning the distant city lights into ghostly smears. My footsteps echoed against wet concrete as I sprinted toward the warehouse at the end of the pier. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of shadows. Rusted machinery loomed like sleeping giants. Stacks of shipping crates created walls within walls. A single work light hung from the ceiling, casting a yellow cone of illumination in the center of the space. And there, in that cone of light, was Antonio. He was tied to a metal chair, his face bloodied, his shirt torn. One eye was swollen shut. His breathing was ragged and wet, but he was alive. Antonio! I rushed forward. Rob, no, it's a trap. Yes, obviously. Victor's voice echoed through the warehouse. Calm, amused. The voice of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. He stepped out from behind a stack of crates, still wearing his surgical scrubs under his coat, still carrying himself with that easy confidence I'd once admired. In his right hand, he held a scalpel. It gleamed in the dim light like a sliver of ice. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Victor walked closer, his footsteps unhurried. The devoted father, rushing to save the day. How predictably noble. It's over, Victor. Helen gave us everything. The police are on their way. The police. Victor laughed softly. Do you know how many investigations I've survived? How many witnesses I've outlasted? The police are an inconvenience. Nothing more. He stopped beside Antonio, resting the scalpel against his throat. Antonio went still, barely breathing. But you, Rob, you're different. Your family. Victor's smile was cold. That's why this hurts me more than you know. Hurts you. You've killed 4 people. You were going to kill my daughter. Kill her? Victor looked genuinely offended. I love Megan. I would never hurt her. The insurance policy. The will changes. Helen told us everything. Helen told you what she thought she knew. Victor shook his head sadly. Megan was never in danger. The financial arrangements were simply precautions, in case our marriage didn't work out. Surely you can understand that. You're lying. Am I? Victor's eyes met mine. I've killed 4 people. That's true. Useless people. People who contributed nothing to society. People whose money could fund research that saves thousands of lives. He pressed the scalpel slightly against Antonio's skin. A thin line of blood appeared. I'm not a monster, Rob. I'm a visionary. You're a murderer. I'm a surgeon. Victor's voice hardened. I make choices every day about who lives and who dies, who deserves my skills and who doesn't. These patients would have died anyway. I simply accelerated the process and used their resources for a greater good. The twisted logic made my stomach turn. He actually believed it. Actually believed he was some kind of hero. And what about me? I asked, keeping my voice steady. 5 years ago, you saved my life. Yes. I did. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Do you know why? Because I wasn't worth enough money. Partly. But also because of what you did for me. Victor's voice softened. The parking garage. Fire. You pulled me out. Saved my life before I could save yours. He smiled. I always pay my debts, Rob. Even to people who don't deserve it. But now I'm a threat. Now you're a complication. Victor sighed. And I don't like complications. He raised the scalpel. Victor. Megan's voice rang through the warehouse. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fog. Walsh was behind her, gun drawn. Victor froze. For the first time, I saw surprise on his face. Megan, you shouldn't be here. Put down the scalpel, Victor. Walsh's voice was calm and commanding. It's over. We have Helen's evidence. We have her testimony. There's no way out. Victor looked at his wife. At the gun pointed at him. At Antonio bleeding in the chair. At me, standing between him and the door. You don't understand, he said quietly. None of you understand what I've accomplished. The lives I've saved with that money. The research I've funded. The future I'm building. The future you're building is a prison cell. Walsh moved closer. Put down the weapon. Now. Victor's hand tightened on the scalpel. For a terrible moment, I thought he was going to cut Antonio's throat anyway. One last act of spite before the end. Then Megan spoke. Victor. Her voice cracked. I loved you. I really did. But this isn't love. This isn't vision. This is sickness. Something broke behind Victor's eyes. You don't mean that. I do. Tears streamed down Megan's face. The man I married was a lie. Everything about us was a lie. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to understand how I didn't see it. The scalpel trembled in Victor's hand. I could have given you everything, he whispered. We could have been perfect. We were never perfect. We were a trap. Megan's voice steadied. And now it's time to let go. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights flickered through the fog. Backup was arriving. Victor looked at the lights. At the gun. At the woman he'd thought he owned. Then, slowly, he lowered the scalpel. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. All of you. You don't know what you're destroying. We know exactly what we're destroying. I stepped forward and took the scalpel from his hand. A murderer, a fraud, and a man who thought his hands made him God. Walsh moved in with handcuffs. Victor didn't resist as she secured his wrists behind his back. His eyes stayed fixed on Megan, something like grief in their depths. I loved you, he said. Megan turned away. You don't know what love means. I cut Antonio free as officers flooded the warehouse. He sagged against me, barely conscious but alive. We did it. He breathed. We actually did it. I looked at Victor being led away. At Megan, wiping her tears. At the warehouse, full of evidence that would finally bring justice to Eleanor, Margaret, Richard, and Catherine. Yeah, I said quietly. We did, but Victor's last words echoed in my mind. You don't know what you're destroying. And somewhere deep inside, I wondered if we truly understood what we'd just begun. The sirens cut through the harbor fog like screaming ghosts. I stood outside the warehouse, watching police cruisers flood the pier. Their lights painted everything in alternating washes of red and blue, turning the night into a fever dream of color and shadow. Victor Chen sat in the back of the lead cruiser, his hands cuffed behind him. Through the window, I could see his face. Calm, composed. Even now, even caught, he wore that mask of serene confidence. But his eyes told a different story. They found mine through the glass, and what I saw there wasn't defeat. It was calculation. Even now, he was thinking, planning, looking for angles. Mr. Callahan. Detective Walsh appeared beside me, her notebook in hand. We need your statement. And your daughter's. Tonight, while it's fresh. Of course. Antonio's being transported to Mass General. Concussion. Broken ribs. but he'll live. Walsh glanced toward the cruiser. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of us. She nodded, something like respect in her eyes. I've been chasing this case for 3 years. 3 years of dead ends and buried evidence and doors slammed in my face. Her voice cracked slightly. I'd started to think I'd never get him. You got him now. We got him. Walsh straightened her shoulders. The DA is already preparing charges. 4 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, falsifying medical records. She paused. And that's just the beginning. Once we go through Victor's warehouse, his financial records, that journal Helen mentioned, there could be more victims we don't even know about. More victims. The thought made my stomach turn. What happens to Helen? Walsh sighed. That's complicated. She's cooperating fully, turning state's evidence. The DA will push for reduced charges in exchange for her testimony. She shook her head. She'll still do time, but probably not as much as she deserves. She saved our lives tonight. Her evidence. Her dead man's switch. Without her, Victor would still be killing people. I understand she was scared, but fear doesn't excuse complicity. She was right. I knew she was right. But I also remembered Helen's face in that safe house. The tears, the trembling hands, the weight of years of guilt crushing her from the inside. Evil wasn't always simple. Sometimes it wore the face of weakness instead of malice. And Megan? I asked. Will she have to testify? Probably. The prosecution will want her story. The whirlwind romance. The financial changes. The moment she realized who she'd married. Walsh's expression softened. It won't be easy for her. But she's strong. Stronger than she knows. I looked across the pier to where Megan stood with a female officer. Someone had draped a blanket around her shoulders. She was staring at the cruiser that held Victor, her face unreadable. My daughter. My brave, broken, beautiful daughter. She'd married a monster and survived. She'd faced the truth, when believing would have been so much easier. She'd walked into that warehouse knowing she might not walk out. Linda would have been proud. God. Linda would have been so proud. Dad. Megan's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her standing there, the blanket clutched around her shoulders. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. They're taking him to county lockup. Arraignment is tomorrow morning. Are you okay? She laughed. A broken, hollow sound. No, I'm not okay. I don't think I'll be okay for a long time. She wiped her eyes. But I'm alive. And he's in custody. And those women, Eleanor, Margaret, Richard, Catherine, they'll finally have justice. I pulled her into my arms, held her the way I had when she was 5 years old and afraid of the dark. She sobbed against my chest, her whole body shaking. It's over, I whispered. It's finally over. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. The trial would take months, maybe years. Victor could afford the best lawyers in the country. They would challenge the evidence, attack Helen's credibility, claim the financial records were fabricated, and Victor himself would never stop fighting, never stop scheming. Even from behind bars, he would be dangerous. Mr. Callahan. A young officer approached us. There's someone here to see you. I looked up. Antonio Reyes stood at the edge of the crime scene tape, supported by a paramedic. His face was a mess of bruises, but he was smiling. I walked over to him, Megan at my side. You crazy old man, Antonio said, his voice rough. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. All of us. Antonio's eyes glistened. 2.5 years. 2.5 years of watching, waiting, hoping someone would believe me. He grabbed my hand, squeezed it tight. Thank you. Thank you for believing. Thank you for having the courage to warn us. I squeezed back. If you hadn't come to that restaurant, if you hadn't risked everything to slip me that note, then Megan would be dead within a year. Antonio looked at my daughter. I'm sorry. For what you're going through. For what you'll have to face. Megan shook her head. Don't apologize. You saved my life. You and my father. She took Antonio's other hand. We're going to get through this. All of us. Together. The three of us stood there in the flashing lights. Connected by trauma and survival, and the strange bonds that form when you face darkness together. Behind us, Victor's cruiser pulled away from the pier. I watched its taillights disappear into the fog, carrying the man who'd saved my life and tried to destroy my daughters. It's not over, Antonio said quietly, reading my thoughts. The trial, the media, Victor's lawyers. It's going to be a war. I know. Are you ready for that? I thought about Linda, about the strength she'd shown during her cancer battle, about the words she'd whispered to me the night before she died. Protect our girl, Rob. No matter what. Promise me. I'd kept that promise. Against all odds, against a monster wearing an angel's face, I'd kept it. Yeah, I said, watching the fog swallow Victor's cruiser whole. I'm ready. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The surgeon's hands were finally in chains, and this time, they would stay there. 6 months later, autumn returned to Boston. I stood at the window of my kitchen, watching leaves drift down from the maple tree Linda and I had planted 30 years ago. The same tree Megan used to climb as a little girl, scraping her knees and laughing at my panic. The same tree Linda had sat beneath during her final summer, too weak to walk but still smiling at the birds. Some things endure. Some things remain, even when everything else falls apart. The trial had lasted 4 months. 4 months of testimony and evidence and lawyers arguing over every detail. Victor's defense team had been exactly as ruthless as Walsh predicted. They attacked Helen's credibility, claimed the financial records were fabricated, suggested Antonio and I had conspired to frame an innocent man, but the evidence was overwhelming. Helen's recordings, the journal from Victor's warehouse, filled with meticulous notes about each victim, the altered medication logs, the testimony from nurses who'd noticed strange things but been too afraid to speak up until now. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of insurance fraud. Guilty of falsifying medical records. Victor Chen would spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, he didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't rage. He simply looked at me across the courtroom with those cold, calculating eyes and smiled. Your heart still belongs to me, Rob, he said as the bailiffs led him away. Every beat, every breath, you owe me everything. I didn't respond. I just held Megan's hand and watched the man who'd saved my life disappear through the side door. He was right, in a way. My heart did belong to him. Every scar on my chest was a reminder of his skill, his hands, his choice to let me live. But hearts are complicated things. They can carry gratitude and hatred at the same time. Victor gave me 5 extra years. I used those years to destroy him. Maybe that's justice. Maybe it's irony. Maybe it's just life. Messy and painful and impossible to understand. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Megan stood on the porch, a casserole dish in her hands. Dad. She smiled. I brought dinner. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. She stepped inside, heading for the kitchen. Besides, if I left you to cook for yourself, you'd live on frozen pizza and regret. I laughed. It felt good to laugh. We ate at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd told her the truth about Victor. The same table where we'd planned our investigation, spread out evidence, prepared for battle. Now it was just a table again. A place for family dinners and morning coffee and ordinary life. The divorce was finalized yesterday, Megan said quietly. I got the papers. How do you feel? She was quiet for a moment. Relieved. Sad. Angry. She shook her head. I keep thinking about all the warning signs I missed. How he controlled everything without me even noticing. How easily I fell for his act. You couldn't have known, couldn't I? Her eyes met mine. He killed 4 people, Dad. He was planning to kill me. And I slept next to him every night for 3 weeks without suspecting a thing. He fooled everyone. Patients, colleagues, the entire hospital. I reached across the table, took her hand. He was a predator, who'd spent 15 years perfecting his mask. You're not stupid for believing him. You're human. Megan squeezed my hand. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I'm going to be okay, she said. Eventually, I'm seeing a therapist. Taking things one day at a time. That's all any of us can do. We finished dinner, washed the dishes together, talked about normal things. Her job at a new hospital in Cambridge. My plans to finally fix the fence in the backyard. The Thanksgiving dinner we'd have next month with Antonio, who'd become something like family in the aftermath of everything. Before she left, Megan paused at the door. Yeah? Thank you. Her voice cracked slightly. For believing that waiter. For not ignoring your instincts. For fighting for me when I didn't even know I needed saving. I pulled her into my arms. Held her the way I had when she was a little girl. The way I would hold her for as long as I lived. I'm your father, I said. That's what fathers do. She left as the sun was setting, her taillights disappearing down the street. I stood on the porch, watching the autumn sky turn from gold to purple to black. Linda's voice echoed in my memory. The last words she'd spoken to me. 4 years ago, in that hospital room. Protect our girl, Rob, no matter what. Promise me, I'd kept that promise. Against all odds. Against a monster who wore an angel's face. Against the debt I owed to the man who'd saved my life. Some hands are meant to heal. They study for years, practice for decades, develop skills that border on miraculous. They hold hearts, and mend wounds, and pull people back from the edge of death. Some hands are meant to harm. They use those same skills, that same knowledge, to take instead of give, to destroy instead of create, to turn medicine into murder. And some hands are just meant to hold, to comfort, to protect, to catch your daughter when she falls and never let go. Victor Chen's hands had been the first 2. Healer and killer, wrapped in the same elegant fingers. My hands were calloused from 40 years of electrical work, scarred from old mistakes, trembling sometimes when the memories got too heavy. But they were the hands of a father, and that was enough. I went inside, made coffee, sat at the table where Linda used to sit, where Megan had cried, where a family had been broken and slowly rebuilt. Outside, the maple tree swayed in the evening breeze. Its leaves were falling, but its roots were deep. Some things endure, some things remain, and some lights, no matter how dark the night, refuse to go out.